So like a lot of Chinese smartphone manufacturers, Realme has been really effing busy in 2020. I've featured no less than 9 of their blowers right here on TechSpert in this absolute garbage fire of a year, not to mention smartwatches, fitness bands and all kinds of other shenanigans. And that's why when people ask me how many Netflix shows I burned through during lockdown, I merely reply with manic wild-eyed laughter. Now, I recently covered the Realme 7 and the Realme 7 Pro, which offer different premium experiences on the cheap, and now they've been joined by the Realme 7 5G, a £279 handset which shares a lot of DNA with that vanilla Realme 7, but also boosts those specs in a couple of key areas. One of those areas naturally being the 5G support. Now, I've had my SIM stuffed inside of the Realme 7 5G for roughly a week now, so here's my in-depth review of this affordable, future-proofed blower. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notification bell. Cheers! Now, anyone who's seen the standard Realme 7 will immediately get that nagging sense of deja vu upon clapping eyes on the 5G-ified model. It is, after all, essentially the same design here, with the exception of the camera chassis, which is now a bit of a wide boy instead of super long. As before, you have that rather snazzy split finish, which makes the plastic arse look a bit more premium than some rivals. And that matte finish means that it's not too susceptible to picking up greasy prints as well, and a quick buffing usually sorts it right out. And durability certainly isn't an issue either. Despite that placky backing, the Realme 7 5G is yet to pick up a single scratch or nick, which is great to see. And around front as well, you've got a Gorilla Glass 3 display covered with a screen protector to keep it doubly safe. But yeah, not too surprisingly, the Realme 7 5G is another bloody big beast, proving a proper handful for everyday use, as well as a bit of a hefty monster as well at nearly 200 grams. So it's definitely a good thing that you've got that one-handed help, courtesy of a screen shrinking mode that isn't too awkward to call up, plus the nifty corner swipe gesture which pulls app icons down towards the bottom of your desktop. And as any Realme fans out there will know, these features are all part and parcel of the Realme UI, which is a near identical twin to the Color OS launcher, and here it sits on top of Android 10. Here's hoping that Android 11 isn't too far off. And the overall day-to-day software experience has been perfectly enjoyable here on the Realme 7 5G as usual. No funny quirks to speak of, thankfully. You've got all your standard features like a bit of NFC support for your contactless payments, and you've also got a rather generous 120 gigs of storage stuffed in here as well, which is expandable via micro SD, and that's in a separate slot from the dual SIM slots. And on top of all that, you've also got some extra bonus bits, including a reliable face recognition tool which offers an alternative unlocking option alongside the responsive edge-mounted fingerprint sensor. And if you want a proper in-depth look at the software here on the Realme 7 5G, then definitely go check out my full Realme UI tips and tricks guide, which is live right now, and a bit of a stonker if I do say so myself. Now, Realme smartphones usually have pretty solid media chops even at this sort of budget price point, and the Realme 7 5G does not disappoint. You've got a 6.5-inch IPS screen packing a full HD resolution, and that serves up plenty of fine detail when you're perusing pics or viewing a bit of video. Colours aren't as poppy as those spewed forth by the Realme 7 Pro's gorgeous OLED panel, but neither do they appear muted when you're watching a bit of vivid content. And contrast levels are perfectly respectable for an IPS panel too. Unfortunately, at the time of shooting this review, I still can't get anything to actually stream on Disney+, but that's because I am reviewing a pre-release model, so it obviously hasn't got full support for Disney+ just yet, but that should be rectified when the phone actually goes on sale, fingers crossed, touch wood, etc. And while the regular Realme 7 swaggered about all fancy like with its plush 90Hz display, the Realme 7 5G actually pumps that right up to a 120Hz refresh rate to match some rivals like the Xiaomi Mi 10T Lite. And by default, the Realme 7 5G automatically scales the refresh from 60 to 120 based on what you're actually doing at the time, but you can stick it on 120Hz full time if you want those silky smooth animations when you're flicking through apps, menus, whatever, although of course, as usual, not all apps support 120Hz. And the audio is on point on the Realme 7 5G as well, even from that bottom-mounted mono speaker, which packs a decent clout on top volume with reasonable clarity. But of course, you will need to hook up a respectable pair of headphones to enjoy the Dolby Atmos audio here on the Realme 7 5G. You got support for the usual codecs, AAC, and all that good stuff. And I found that the Bluetooth performance was absolutely flawless, whether I was streaming to True Wireless earbuds, speakers, whatever. And yes, you do have a headphone jack down below for a proper wired connection. Now, I was very interested in the performance here too, because the Realme 7 5G is one of very few phones to hit the UK packing one of Mediatek's Dimensity chipsets. What you got in here is the Mediatek Dimensity 800U, which has full 5G support built in, and that works on 2 SIMs simultaneously in quite an energy efficient manner. When it comes to sheer grunt, you've got similar performance here to other 5G-ified phones around this price too, like the Mi 10T Lite with its Snapdragon 750G chipset. My review model packs 6 gigs of RAM, and it absolutely smashed its way through endless games of Call of Duty Mobile, maintaining a constant frame rate even when I chucked those detail settings all the way up. With a fast 180Hz touch sampling rate, the touchscreen controls were a match for the fast-paced gameplay too, so you better believe that motherfuckers were feeling the pain that I brought. I brought all of the pain, and they felt it hard. And like the original Realme 7 phones as well, this handset is pretty ruddy good when it comes to the battery life too. In fact, if anything, it seems to be a little bit better, probably helped along by that energy efficient Mediatek chipset. You've once again got a mighty 5000 mAh cell just like the vanilla Realme 7, and I found this took at least a day and a half of pretty intensive use, and I'm talking Skyping, camera play, media streaming, all that good stuff before it finally drained. And when it is finally time to refill the bugger, you've got support for 30-watt dart charge as well, so about an hour plugged in, you'll have pretty much a full battery again. So the Realme 7 5G is a slight upgrade in a few areas over the original handset, as well as adding in that lovely 5G support. But when it comes to the camera tech, there is no real change. This blower's 48 megapixel primary shooter uses the same Samsung sensor as the European version of the original Realme 7, and sadly once again it is easily done in by less than perfect shooting conditions. This thing captures pics at 12 megapixels by default, using 4-in-1 pixel binning for supposedly brighter, cleaner results when needed. However, I found that indoor shots were still often warm or grainy when you check them back on something bigger than the phone screen, unless you make sure that the lighting is very tight indeed. While any kind of motion from your subject often results in a blurry image. Low light snaps usually come out really dull with the auto mode, although the dedicated night mode helps to rectify this problem to some degree. If conditions are good, then thankfully you can expect a sharp image even with the 12 megapixel default mode, complete with colours that aren't too far off real life. Be careful when you're shooting against bright skies, however, because once again those optics struggle, often oversaturating the final pic. The rest of the Realme 7 5G's camera lenses are also cribbed from the standard Realme 7, including a simple 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle snapper, which tends to produce darker, warmer shots than that primary sensor. And you've also got a very basic 2 megapixel macro lens and a black and white monochrome portrait lens as well to bring the grand total up to 4. You can shoot up to 4K resolution video here on the Realme 7 5G, and again, as long as the conditions are alright, you'll end up with decent enough home movies. The focus tends to cope fine with moving subjects, and audio is cleanly captured as long as there isn't much wind interference. Even the image stabilization is pretty decent at that Ultra HD level. And then finally around front, that 16 megapixel selfie shooter is again rather limited in how it copes with adversity, often producing whitewashed shots in strong lighting. But the portraits mods are respectable, and overall it is fine for simple shareable shots. So that right there is my full final verdict on the Realme 7 5G after using it as my full-time smartphone for a week. And as you can see, you're not just getting that extra 5G support on there, you've got a couple of other little bonuses compared with the vanilla model, including a 120Hz display and even better battery life. However, it is a fair chunk of change more expensive than the standard Realme 7 as well, and I'd say if you're not too bothered about that 5G support, I'd probably rather go with the Realme 7 Pro because it definitely boasts the better camera tech. And sure, that OLED display is locked at 60Hz, but it is an absolute stunner too. And of course there are some strong rivals out there like the Mi 10T Lite, which can be bagged for a little bit less cash. So what do you think of the Realme 7 5G? Are you tempted? It's definitely be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do subscribe, ding that notifications bell, and have yourselves a lovely rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you!